Hi everybody, my name is Pat O'Hara and I'm your instructor for History 245. I'm just making this week one video to get my face on the screen and to provide a little bit of overview of the topics that we're going to be discussing this week throughout the class, and also just take some time to kind of introduce the class and myself. So a very quick agenda today. First of all, I just want to welcome everyone to the class, provide a little biography of myself. Secondly, we're going to look at this week's topic briefly, which is the start of the Cold War. And many are already rather engaged in a discussion, and I'm very happy that some of you are just jumping right in, and that's excellent, and we're doing a great job so far. We're going to look at just kind of a broad, high-level list of upcoming course topics that we'll be studying throughout the term. And then finally, we'll break it down with a list of your responsibilities for this class. Now, first a bit about myself, and there's a picture of me there. If you could tell by comparing it to the video of me on the screen, that was a few years ago, probably back in, I want to say 2015, when I traveled with my wife to England and Scotland, and there's across the river from the Parliament building in London. I graduated from Penn State in 2004 with a degree in secondary education. Penn State works their education program a little bit differently than some other schools, but my degree is actually in secondary education with a focus on history, whereas a lot of other Pennsylvania colleges, at least, provide the focus on history and then also get secondary education certificate. But as you might have guessed, I really enjoy history. I've taught it for 15 years at the secondary level and almost 10 years now at the college level. And my love for history led me to really, soon after graduating from Penn State, to get a master's in history from East Stroudsburg University of Pennsylvania, which is one of the Pennsylvania state schools. And then I've also, much more recently in 2018, obtained an MS in Instructional Design and Technology from SNHU. So I've taken coursework here as SNHU in a very similar format to the class you're taking now and other classes. So if you have any problems with the navigation, of course, please let me know. I've been doing this for a while, and I've been on both my end and your end. I live in Pennsylvania with my wife and dog. I especially like to travel, like you might guess from that picture. This summer we went to Nova Scotia, which was fantastic, on the eastern coast of Canada. And throughout the term, I'll be getting to know everybody a lot better. Now, excuse my cheesy animations there, but it's one of the funs of PowerPoint. What we're looking at here is the start of the Cold War. And today and this week, we're really looking at the origins of the Cold War. But since this class is a post-1945 class, it somewhat ignores the earlier origins of the Cold War during a time that we wouldn't have even used that terminology yet, right? When we're looking at the lexicon in American history, the term Cold War isn't something that's used until post-World War II. But that makes it seem as though, all of a sudden the tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, if you hear clicking, that's my wonderful dog on the tile. He tends to do that whenever I'm making a video. But anyway, when we consider the post-1945 Cold War, it makes us kind of think okay, the Soviet Union and the United States were friends, and then all of a sudden had this falling out that had to do with World War II. And there is some truth to that, right? And that's what we're looking at this week in our discussion. But it's important to know that there are some earlier origins of the Cold War. By the time that 1945 came around, the concepts of anti-communism and anti-radicalism in general have already been very much ingrained in American culture. Even if we go back to the 1880s and we see events like the Haymarket Riot in Chicago, where anarchists were accused of setting off a bomb and killing police officers during a rally. if we look into the assassination of William McKinley by Leon Zolgoff, a guy that was also considered an anarchist, which is another left-wing philosophy that was kind of grouped together with communists and socialists and other left-wing radicals during the early 1900s, late 1800s. But World War I is when we really see the split between the United States and Russia. And to go back to that is kind of important to understanding the overall vibe of the Cold War and why the relations between those two countries were so bad, even before those two individuals that you see on the screen, Joseph Stalin and Harry Truman, were in charge of their respective countries. During World War I, the U.S. was hesitant to get involved as an active fighting force, right? America was officially declared as neutral. And although the United States was neutral, the U.S. was very heavily aiding the Western allies, particularly France and Britain, by shipping arms, shipping weaponry to those countries, whereas they weren't doing the same to Germany, which initially was more of a logistic thing, but later on became ideological as well, as the U.S. was more on par with the Western democracies than they were with the Central Powers during the First World War. The other major Central Power at the time was the Russian Empire. Now, it contrasted kind of with the other allies in that Russia was an absolute monarchy ruled over by the Tsar, whereas the other allies were, I don't want to even call them emerging democracies, because in the case of England, really, and France, they had already been democratic nations for a long time. But my point is here is that during the First World War, Russia experienced a revolution. And during the First Russian Revolution, the Tsar was deposed, which means he was kicked out of office. And a new transitional government that was seemingly democratic came into power, led by a guy named Alexander Kerensky. This new government, although it was able to come to power basically by its opposition to the Tsar's war policies, still decided that Russia was going to stay fighting in the war. That angered a lot of Russian people, but it made the Western allies really happy, because if Russia withdrew, France and Britain would have a rougher time fighting in the conflict. However, it also encouraged the United States. Right? President Woodrow Wilson at the time was looking for various justifications to get the U.S. involved as a true belligerent in the conflict. And among those justifications was that now that Russia was a democracy, the U.S. would be fighting on the side of the world's democracies against the world's autocratic empires, particularly the German Empire and the Austrian Empire. Well, before the United States then goes to war, right, declares war on Germany, before the U.S. was even finished mobilizing, Russia experienced a second revolution, known as the October Revolution, even though it happened in early November, and you guys can look up why that would be the case. It's kind of a little interesting side note. It's also known as the Bolshevik Revolution or the Communist Revolution. And this is when the famous Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky overthrew the weak Kerensky government and basically assumed power in Russia, turning Russia into the world's first country to really adhere to the communist philosophies of Marx and Engels, which were later kind of adapted to fit Russian needs by Vladimir Lenin. However, Lenin came to power basically by promising the people that he would get Russia out of the war, and that's exactly what Lenin did. They ended the war with Germany. They negotiated a separate peace with Germany. They vowed to export communism worldwide and vowed support for international communist movements in all countries of the world, including here in the United States. That caused a massive rift between the Western world and communist Russia. And as we're investigating now, we'll see that during World War II, the Soviet Union under Stalin and United States under Franklin Roosevelt cast their differences aside for a few years in order to fight the Nazi threat, which they successfully did. But even before the end of the war, as some of you are seeing in your initial posts, those tensions never quite went away. Yes, they were allies. They had official diplomatic relations, which didn't exist in the time period from 1917 revolution until the 1930s. But the relationship was still quite tense. And we're going to be looking at all sorts of early Cold War events throughout the week. Now, I include this picture here, and I only have 5 more minutes on the software, or the application I'm using, so I'll keep this quick. The pictures here show the diversity and the scope of the Cold War, right? In the top left, we have Dwight Eisenhower as president-elect meeting with troops in Korea. The top right, we have Richard Nixon crushing the monolithic myth of communism, something that we'll talk about when we discuss the 70s, because he actually traveled to China and forged a relationship with the communist Chinese, which was something that during the time we're studying this week and next week would have been seemingly impossible. We see the famous or infamous Fidel Castro giving a speech at the United Nations. We see Ronald Reagan shaking hands with Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet leader, in the 1980s. And hopefully my head's not in the way here, because in the lower right you have Rocky Balboa about to face Ivan Drago. And yeah, that's a fictional thing from the movie Rocky IV. But it's important to our discussion of the Cold War because it shows us just how multifaceted this event was, and just how ingrained in our culture the Cold War became. And this class is not just about the Cold War. I trust that we're going to have some excellent discussions and excellent readings on the Civil Rights Movement, which is among my favorite topics in modern history. As with the Cold War, it wasn't just in the 50s and 60s, right? We'll look at the earlier years of civil rights advocacy and see how they relate to the post-1945 fight for civil rights. And we'll also look at some concerns in the post-Cold War era, roughly from 1991 until now. So again, very limited scope of the class in that it's 1945 to now, which is probably a more narrow time frame than you're used to in other history survey courses. But it's still such a dynamic time period and such a time period of rapid changes that I trust that we'll have a lot to learn in the next 8 weeks. Here's just a list of responsibilities this week, which I don't know why I didn't include on here, but this week you have your discussion. But I also want you to start thinking about your analysis papers, your topic proposals, that stuff. It's best off to start at the end, right? Look at the final project and see all that it entails, because it's going to be submitted in several milestones, with your topic proposal week 3, your rough draft week 5, and the final submission in week 7. We have 2 analysis papers that you'll complete in weeks 2 and weeks, I'm sorry, I left one out there. It should be weeks 2 and weeks 4, and I'll add that the next time. But anyway, look in the syllabus, look at the modules, and let me know what questions you have. There's a lot of work to do, but I trust that you'll find that it's manageable and it's reasonable, and I'm here to help. So if you do have any questions, please shoot them my way, and there is my email address. If you go into the course, you can find my phone number as well under the My Faculty announcement. I am at Eastern Time, so just keep that in mind when you call me. But if you call, leave a message, and I'll get back to you ASAP. And that is it for now. I'm really looking forward to this class. Hopefully I'll be posting some more of these videos. Let me know what you think if you watch it. Happy to address anything else that might be on your mind. And enjoy the rest of your week.